Expressed on this program are not necessarily those of CNS Channel 6.
Good day to you, Guyana, and welcome to Facing the Nation. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you so very much for joining us. I'm back with you this week. Last week we had a rebroadcast of the program, the interview that we had the week before with the minister within the Ministry of Communities responsible for housing, and of course you got a lot of information from her, and we know that was a very popular program and it was a very informative one, so we took the decision to rebroadcast that last week. I want to take this opportunity to say hello and thank you to those of you who are joining us on the CNS Channel 6 Facebook page live. We thank you very much for tuning in, and we trust that you continue to do that, not only for this program but for all of the other programs that are being streamed there. We know some of you, most of you actually in the diaspora, that is how you're able to keep abreast with what is happening here in our very small country, our beautiful country, small but beautiful country, and it is a paradise. There's so much happening that we sometimes have to force ourselves and will ourselves to remind us that we are a paradise despite the challenges. And of course, I know some of the challenges now are coming in terms of politics. There's a lot of political rhetoric in the air. Everyone wants to get their point out. But I was reading something someone wrote earlier, and I just want to take a little piece from it that the people, you know this already, but sometimes you need to be reminded as the battle continues in terms of which political side of the fence you are on, which is your right. It is your right, your democratic right to choose the side, which side that you want to be in terms of politics. Remember, at the end of the day, when all of this is done and the dust settles, we are all Guyanese. So even if you have to argue and be a bit aggressive about it, ensure that you don't become violent, hateful, and spiteful and bitter, because I think sometimes we forget that words do hurt people, even if it's typing, even if you sit behind your little computers and your little keyboards. I call them keyboard bullies, because honestly, that is all the backbone that some of them out there have. But remember, as you argue, as you disagree, agree, whatever it is, you are human. We're all human at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, we're all Guyanese, and we still have to live right here, regardless of who wants to say that they're going to run if so and so is to happen or so and so not happens. At the end of the day, this is our country, and nobody can take care of it better than we can. That being said, I'm alone today. There's a lot of things happening, and we're trying to avoid having too much of varying rhetoric on our program. We want to be coming from one place. So what we're going to do today is have a sort of a feature-like program. I know some of you have been following everything that's happening politically and in terms of government. Some of you have been keeping abreast with statements from the president, statements from the opposition, statements from various other politicians. What I'm going to do today, of course, you know, when you hear Malika Ramsey, it's basically coming from the government side. So what I'm going to do today, for those of you who may have missed it, I'm going to try to get the PNCR, that's the People's National Congress Reform. I'd like to remind you that that is the largest political party in the coalition government. I'll try to bring that press conference that was held last Friday. There was a press conference held today, but of course, in the essence of time and real time, as you know, Facing the Nation is a live program. So it is kind of tricky to actually sit and wait for the footage from that press conference. So we'll try to have bits and pieces of last week's press conference for you. I know for a fact that the press conference that was held an hour ago or so at Commerce Place to Fire, the panel consisted of the minister herself, Minister Ferguson, the minister who was here week before last. That minister was on the PNCR's press conference panel today, along with the Minister of Communities himself, Minister Ronald Bulkin. So we'll try to get that for you. Also, what's happening too, I want you to know that even though we're bringing some, if you want to call it, some of a reheat, some of the things that would have been in the public domain already, of course, you know that the viewers on Facing the Nation are a bit different. Not everyone gets to see those things as they happen, so it's good that we put it here on Facing the Nation. But one of the things I want to let you know, and you should be getting a statement from the Ministry of the Presidency, from the President, not too long from now, because I know maybe about half hour ago, he also had an interview, but in the essence of time and the fact that Facing the Nation is live, we could not wait for that. But I know he had a very brief interview. You'll be seeing a statement from it, but just to keep you abreast, this is just to remind you of the President and the government's position. This is notes that I would have gotten while the interview was being conducted. Of course, obviously I was not there, but it's basically saying that the president in his interview has reiterated his position, and by extension that of the government, to ensure credible elections are held at the earliest possible time. And I'm happy that the president keeps harping on this, because there's so much rhetoric and so much different pieces of information, especially on social media, that people are becoming confused in their own fight to have their own voices heard, and unfortunately abuse each other out on social media. The message is getting lost. So I'm happy that there's a continuous amount of information being put in the public domain. So many of us have complained that we didn't think that the public relations was up to par, but I'm happy that the information is being placed out there now. The president also has maintained that the government continues to act in good faith, as is testament with the meeting of the working groups chaired by the PNCR, that's People National Congress Reform Chair, Minister of Public Health, Ms. Valda Ann Lawrence, in compliance with the ruling of the CCJ to hammer out the names to be submitted by the leader of the opposition. It is important to note that the CCJ, in giving its ruling, identified the need for a consensus approach to the formal submission of the names. And again, I'm going to harp a bit on consensus approach, because while you're there in the land or in the world of social media, fighting and carrying on and using each other out, whether they like it or not, at the end of the day, leaders from the two political giants in the country have to meet to hammer, to use the word, the term that is everywhere now, hammer out issues when it comes to getting a new chair for the Guyana Elections Commission. There's so much rhetoric happening around that in terms of the confusion whether there should be house-to-house registration or not. The government continues to call for house-to-house registration, of course, because the list, as to put it in ordinary terms, the list is dirty. But again, a number of things are happening, but the information is out there. It's for you to tap into it, read for yourselves, understand what is happening, and at the same time, go according to the Constitution. Let the Constitution guide you as you make your arguments, and you'll be able to understand whether you're in the right place or the wrong place, where your thoughts and sentiments and opinions on these matters are at this present time. All right, you've gotten a mouthful from me. I did promise you that we'll try to get that not the most recent, but last week's press conference from the People's National Congress Reform. But in the meantime, while we're waiting on that, what we will do is bring you the briefing done by the President, His Excellency President David Granger, on the 16th of July. He also part of that briefing was the Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency, the Honorable Joseph Harmon. They both briefed the media after the July 16 meeting, of course, with the other side regarding the chairman for GCOM. So take a look. It's a very brief briefing, and hopefully we'll come right back with you and try to get you some clips of that PNCR press conference. This is Facing the Nation. Stay with us.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to be here. I am happy to report that we had a very fruitful meeting. The leader of the opposition, accompanied by the Hinterland, met me, accompanied by Director General of Finance Officer. As you know, after the initial meeting between the leader of the opposition and myself, we agreed to set up a working group. The working group had 3 meetings, which came to an end on Thursday the 11th. On Friday the 12th, the CCG gave a ruling, and the government of Guyana has agreed largely to accept the ruling and to expedite the process of selection of the chairman of the election commission. We feel that this process could be brought to an end very quickly, and on that basis I agreed to meet the leader of the opposition. Unfortunately, it was not possible to meet yesterday, Monday, and he agreed to postpone the meeting until today, Tuesday, the 16th. We have reached a broad agreement. We have not completed the process, but I will ask the Director General to read the statement, which is agreed between the two sides.
Yes, sir. The joint statement by His Excellency President David Granger and Mr. Bar Jagdeo, Leader of the Opposition. The President, accompanied by Mr. Joseph Harmon, Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency, and the Leader of the Opposition, accompanied by Mr. Irfan Ali, Member of Parliament, met today to discuss the appointment of a chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. It was agreed as follows. 1, that from the list of 5 names shortlisted by the working group, 4 were found not unacceptable to the President. And 2, as part of the hammering out process, the 2 names suggested by His Excellency the President and other names as may be necessary will be discussed further. The parties agreed to continue meeting on this matter tomorrow, 2019-07-17. This is the joint statement.
Yes, we can take a few questions. We will not mention names. This is the statement that has been agreed with these two sides. So we will not vary from that agreement. We will not add information which has not yet been agreed. It's important to note that the meeting will take place tomorrow, the 17th of July, and we expect that we make progress on crafting a list. Please bear in mind that the power of the authority of the leader of the opposition under the Constitution to submit a list of 6 names not unacceptable to the President has not been impaired, has not been varying. Equally, when the President receives that list, he will make a choice. What the CCJ did point out is that there should be a hammering out process in the arrival of those names on the list. I think that's as much as we can say today.
Mr. President, Julie Johnson. Would you say that your team at the hammering out talks were doing this with the full presidential authority to weed out discard some of the names on that list of 11? And I would also ask you whether or not this process is actually the formal process and not the informal one. Or would you be going back to the informal process to have the teams hammer out the other names before they come to you?
We have moved forward. The process which the Director General described will move forward tomorrow in that there will be a smaller team. We will not use the same working group. There will be a smaller team which will continue the process of engagement. We have not disengaged, and we are working to have a list which could be sent by the leader of the opposition to the President as early as possible. So we're not going backwards to the working group. We're moving forward to continue the hammering out process. It has not completed. So it's not a question of discarding, it's a question of selecting persons who satisfy the criteria which have been laid down in the Constitution.
Sir, my other question had to do with the authority vested in the teams that represented you at the meeting. Were they in full authority from you to decide on the list? Even bearing in mind the 11 that you, the opposition leader had presented, was presented to you long in advance of the votes.
They had the authority to examine the lists and to conduct what is called a hammering out process in order to produce a short list for the consideration of the leader of the opposition and myself. They did their work. We're very satisfied that they have reduced the list from 18 or 11 to 4 plus 2. But the list is not complete, even though numerically you could say we have 6 names. We still have, as the Director pointed out, we still have the possibility that other names could be suggested.
Just a clarification, sir. Are those thoughts, the hammering out thoughts, Mr. Harman indicated that some of the people were hammered out or nailed out of the list because of security reasons. Would you care to expand on that?
We will not be giving reasons at this stage. The process of hammering out, I would regard as confidential. As far as we're concerned, it was a satisfactory process, and we feel that the final list, or the list that we've arrived at as of Thursday, the 11th of July, was the result of a satisfactory process. But it would be invidious to give reasons, and we have agreed not to give reasons.
Chancy Samuels from NCN. Could you say how soon do you think this process will be concluded? And I don't think Mr. Harman mentioned the time for the meeting tomorrow. And is it a meeting between yourself and the opposition leader, or the two teams?
Yes, the meeting tomorrow, we have not as yet agreed on a time, but it's going to be a very engaged process. We're not disengaging, and therefore it's a telephone call to say, okay, we're going to meet at 9, we're going to meet at 10. But certainly we will remain engaged until, as the President says, we can arrive at a list of 6 names that is not unacceptable to the President.
Based on the discussions, how soon, I mean, this process has to be done with some sort of consistency. So how soon do you think you'll
The President said we will work until we get 6 names that are unacceptable to the President. It's not going to be stretched out, I can tell you that, because in the meeting today, both the President and the leader of the opposition committed to ensuring that this process produces a chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission in the fastest possible time, because we are interested in ensuring that the Elections Commission is complete so that they can do their work and they can advise the President with respect to their readiness to conduct elections in Guyana.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Tomorrow you'll have another bite of that.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, thanks for staying with Facing the Nation. I told you earlier that I was alone today, that I'm going to be doing a feature-like program. Of course, what you were just viewing there would have been the briefing to the media following the July 16 meeting with the opposition regarding the coming up with the names, hammering out again. I'm using that, not my favorite term, but that's what everyone's using, hammering out the names for the chairman of GCOM. Of course, again, that briefing was held at the Ministry of the Presidency by the President himself and also the Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency. Again, I told you earlier that I'm alone, but I broke that rule for just a few minutes. I have, he's being a comedian at this point. Most of you who know him generally as a comedian.
Yes.
He is the, he's the chairman of the Guyana Youth and Student Movement. Again, he's like a brother to this program, so he's not a stranger here. But the reason I decided to interject him into the program today is because he's the one who would have been hosting all of the People's National Congress Reforms press conferences since those restarted, so to speak. The press conferences were not being held for a little while, and they restarted now at a very important time. He is here not only as a representative of the People's National Congress Reform, but as a representative of the youth in the People's National Congress Reform. He chairs those press conferences, and I know he has an opinion on what is happening, even though I told you I'm not going to be able to bring you today's press conference, as it only happened maybe about an hour or two ago. He was at that press conference. He hosted that press conference. Therefore, he'll be able to tell you, just give you a brief idea of what was said, what would have been said, and so on, and also his take on everything that is happening currently regarding our political and governmental situation. Ryan Belgrave, thanks for joining me just for a bit. Great to have you as always.
Thank you for having me, Malika. Quite a mammoth task that you've presented me with this afternoon. I'm happy to be here on Facing the Nation as always, where we can interact with our viewers. As you basically said, the PNCR has restarted its press conference. Today was the third edition of the PNCR's press conference since we have recommenced same. What we felt as a party is that we owe the nation some amount of interaction and also to answer questions as they're fielded by the media. Because as Mr. Harmon rightly said, the nation had grown weary of the one-man show that came out of, or that comes out of Freedom House every Thursday. And basically someone else needs to speak. And also in addressing the nation, we're calling on, the man that should actually be speaking to the nation, Irfan Ali, because he's hiding behind his papi. And so this is why we've started our press conferences. We put out the position of the People's National Congress Reform on a weekly basis as it relates to current issues, and the most topical issues as of late being issues relating to the Guyana Elections Commission, and also the week before we dealt with the consequential orders as they were presided upon by the Caribbean Court of Justice. In today's press conference, we had Ministers Ferguson and Pulkan, and of course Minister Ferguson gave some highlights into infrastructural development in our country over the past 4 years. And, there are changes in development that, as even the jaundiced of eyes can see. There are things that cannot be missed. I don't want to take up your program to iterate what those things are, but just to give an oversight as to what we dealt with in the press conference. And Minister Bulkan read the party's prepared statement as it relates to what the tone is right now, how the party welcomes the house-to-house registration that will commence tomorrow. And of course, this is the decision of an independent Guyana Elections Commission, because as we know, the last list expired in the month of April. And of course, in order for us to have credible elections in this country, we must have credible registration.
Ryan, it would honestly be remiss of me if I didn't raise this. I don't want to put you in the spot, but viewers understand the context with which I'm asking you this. Some of our headlines earlier today, which would have been seen before the PNCR's press conference, was that to the effect that, I'm not quoting directly here, but to the effect that GCOM is being warned by its attorneys against house-to-house registration. My question to you, though, is, was this raised by any of the members of the media? Did they pose that question to any of the members of the panel?
Yes, of course, the members of the media did ask the question in light of the fact that the attorney for the Guyana Elections Commission raised or warned against the holding of house-to-house registration. But as it was answered or responded to at that time, I would have to do the same. I am not an attorney,
Okay.
so I would not want to speak on the matters of the court, save and except the court presides over that matter and passes their judgment.
Okay.
But what I can say is that an independent Guyana Elections Commission, recognizing that this is the natural timeline as it relates to list and the list being expired, has taken a decision some time ago that we will have house-to-house registration. And this, of course, is something that is not unprecedented because it has happened in the past. We can go back to 1992 where elections were postponed, or there before elections were postponed for 2 years so as to accommodate house-to-house registration. There are lots of things that can be said about the list, the expired list. As it is, there's no list in terms of its validity and so. And any caring party, any party that wants to have a credible elections will not be so tolerant or accepting of a list that is proven to be flawed, save and except they have some plans or some, I don't know, some devious or dubious plans in terms of using that list. So one must ask, why is the PPP so invested in ensuring that we use that list? That, as the Guyana Elections Commission has said, even the casual onlooker can see the list is flawed, the list was bloated, and of course now the list has expired.
Okay, all right, great. Again, I stole, viewers, in all fairness, I stole some of his time, so I can't keep him here too long, but I want to ask you again, I can't have you on this program as the chairman of the, I call him the youth boss of the PNCR. You know, that's the term the young people are using. I have to act like I'm young sometimes, but as the youth boss for the PNCR, do you believe that in calling for house-to-house registration, in actually getting it, again, you did stress that GCOM is an independent body, will it reduce some of the anxiety among the young people who want to vote? In your opinion, if there was any anxiety at all, that possibility exists, look, you know, we may not get to vote if we don't have, as they're saying, H2H, house-to-house registration.
The general trust or spirit of the APNU AFC's call at this time for house-to-house registration, it's basically in understanding or in catering for Guyana's youth. We understand that if we have an election using the list that was last used in November of 2018, that we will have scores of Guyanese, we'll have thousands of Guyanese that are disenfranchised, will not have the opportunity to cast their ballot for the party of their choosing. As it is, since the last elections, we had a number of persons that would have fallen off of the list for one reason or the other. And these are things that have to be catered for. So as it relates to your question, yes, I do believe that in having the house-to-house registration, it will, of course, embolden or it will encourage our young people to become a part of this whole thing with the, exercising their legal or legitimate right to take part in the political process. Because nobody wants to sit back. We've done so much in our country to encourage youth to become actively involved in politics. We know that if you check Guyana's history, maybe in the 1960s or so, you had young people that were at the forefront of political advocacy. But then over the last, or maybe the past 2 decades or so, young people basically took a backseat to everything political. And if you talk to young people, they tell you, hey, politics is a dirty game. Now that you have youth that have been reinvigorated, young people basically want to be a part of the political and change movement, and you're to tell them that, hey, the first thing we're going to do to you is that we're going to ensure you can't vote in these elections, but you could jump up and scream for a candidate. You could jump up and scream for a party, but you will not be allowed to vote. Then that is utter nonsense. And the PPP that are somewhat, I don't know, they had a 360, done some backflips or so, and they've taken this sanctimonious position, the deceitful PPP, that, you know what, we are the champions of youth. The same party that did nothing for youth in all of its years in governance, the same party that presided over the murders of so many of Guyana's youth. Now they're telling you that, you know, we are the ones for young people, but at the same time, the set of young people not going to vote these elections, but for the next election, we can be the ones for y'all.
Got you. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave my conversation with Ryan right there for now. I want to thank him for allowing me to steal some of his time. I promised you a feature-like program. Again, you'll get just a bit of the press conference. We have the time, so you'll get a good amount of last week's press conference by the People's National Congress Reform. Of course, take a look and, of course, be informed. This is Facing the Nation.
Ministry of the Presidency, Mr. Joseph Harmon, member of the People's National Congress Reform. We thank you all for coming down. The Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency will read a prepared statement. Then after, we will have some updates from Minister of State, Ms. Dawn Hastings, on the positives of the developmental work done in the Hinterland region by the APNU AFC administration. So I'll hand you over to Director General, Mr. Joseph Harmon, to read a prepared statement.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, the statement by the People's National Congress Reform for this press conference today reads as follows. On June 18th, 2019, in his address to the nation, the President was clear when he said, and I quote, "We respect the legal process and the decisions of the CCJ, as well as the Constitution of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana," end of quote. Throughout this process, the President has shown good faith and has been guided by and obeyed the court's rulings and the Constitution of Guyana. The President wrote to and met the commissioners of GCOM to urge their readiness to conduct credible elections at the earliest possible date. It is important to re-emphasize that the President cannot name a date for elections without the assurance that GCOM is in a state of readiness to deliver credible elections. Free and fair elections are essential to representative democracy. The credibility of elections, in turn, is dependent in part on the integrity of the official list of electors. A contaminated list can adversely affect the credibility of our elections. Immediately after the ruling of the CCJ on June 18th, the President met with Justice James Patterson and accepted his resignation as chairman of the Guyana Elections Commission. The President met the leader of the opposition, Mr. Bar Jagdeo, on the 4th of July 2019 at the Ministry of the Presidency. They discussed the means of selecting a new chairman of the Elections Commission in accordance with the judgment of the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, and given the need to ensure that GCOM is allowed to function in an uninterrupted manner. The meeting aimed to reach consensus on the way forward for the nomination and appointment of the GCOM chairman. The President expressed his wish that this matter be concluded in a matter of days. The President was magnanimous and accorded to the leader of the opposition's request to resubmit the 18 names that were previously submitted. It was agreed that the leader of the opposition would submit a list of names of persons for the President's consideration. That list was submitted. Mrs. Gail Teixeira, acting on behalf of the leader of the opposition, wrote Mr. Joseph Harmon, Director General of the Ministry of the Presidency, on the 28th of June 2019, saying, and I quote, "The leader of the opposition is not averse to the President informally suggesting names in their proposed engagement for his consideration," end of quote. both sides agreed to establish a joint working group which would shortlist the names of 6 and present the list to the leader of the opposition, who has a constitutional responsibility to submit such names to the president. It was also agreed that the exchange of names, or this submission of names, will include also suggestions which the president presented for inclusion on that list. On the first day of the meetings of the high representatives, the president's suggested names were presented. The president was aware that the leader of the opposition would need time to examine the names and engage in the necessary due diligence in order for the process to move forward quickly. The president did this because he is committed to the process and an early conclusion of the deliberations. Unlike the president, Mr. Jagler has used this process to deceive the nation and send negative and misleading messages to the court. He met with the presidents and agreed to the talks. He agreed to the plenipotentiaries meeting. Yet, look at his rhetoric. From the first meeting, he sought to use the media to express unilateralism, citing the Constitution. It is clear if you check his rhetoric and positions taken that he's not acting in a consensual manner, as laid out in paragraph 28 of the judgment of the court, which states, and I quote, "This approach gives the president a role in the identification of the 6 names," end of quote. The government side has been and will continue to adhere to the rulings of the CCJ and the agreement with the leader of the opposition. The government side remains committed to concluding the process within days to enable GCOM to function. Once this is done, Guyanese can expect credible elections in the shortest possible time. End of statement.
Thank you. That, of course, was the prepared statement read by Director General of the Ministry of Presidency and member of the People's National Congress Reform. Now we will have some highlights of the developmental work done by the government in the Hinterland region, read by the Minister of State and Principal Political Secretary of the PNCR, Minister Don Hastings.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity granted unto me to highlight some of the developmental projects that has been done in the Hinterland region. Guyana has begun moving in the right direction after 23 long years of a PPP government. Under the President Granger's leadership, we are delivering our plan to secure a better life for all. Therefore, the people in the Hinterland are no exception. A greater sense of unity is bringing our people together. We are connecting our people in the hinterland with the people on the coast, not only through building bridges and roads, but by establishing ICT hubs throughout the length and breadth of Guyana. And to date, we have established 171 ICT hubs from regions 1 to regions 10. Here I wish to highlight some of the infrastructural development that has been done in the Hinterland region. The government, through the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, has built strong, modern, concrete roads in Madya, in the Potaro-Seperuni region, in Maburuma in the Barima-Waini region, and Bartika in the Kayuni-Mazuruni region. The government also have created what we call green spaces. Green spaces at the Hosororo Hill in the Barima-Waini region. Green spaces in Lethem, in Bartika, and of course a spanking boulevard at the waterfront of the Kayuni-Mazuruni region in Bartika. We have also The children in the hinterland have also benefited from His Excellency's 5Bs program, which is the bicycles, boats, breakfast, boots, and books. Today, children in the Pomeroon River, Mazruni River, Borima River are accessing school through the David G's school boat, And children who have to go to school by road are attending school by using the David G school buses and bicycles. And to add to those, children are also enjoying healthy breakfast, if not in all of the schools, in most of the schools in our hinterland. And if I may say further on education, recently we have heard the National Grade 6 assessment results, and there has been improvement in the performance of our children coming from the hinterland region, which I think is a vision that His Excellency had wanted to see. And within the short 4 years that we have been in government, this is becoming a reality. I also wish to talk about the dormitory which will soon be commissioned at Lillian Dahl, which will house or accommodate our students who are coming from the hinterland to access tertiary education. In the past, it was very difficult for them. They had to leave their comfortable homes and then had to find monies to pay rent, to find places to stay, and to find monies for transportation. But the government of today, who is a caring government, is now providing accommodation for our hinterland students who will be attending University of Guyana, Guyana School of Agriculture, Guyana Technical Institute, and other technical institutions that we have in Georgetown. And so today, these are some of the real developments that has been happening under the APNU AFC government. And I must say that we will continue to provide a good life for all our brothers and sisters in the hinterland region. I thank you.
All right, we are going to leave that there for now. It was a very lengthy press conference, but the government's position was gotten across. Again, just to remind you, that would have been last Friday's press conference. Another press conference was held maybe about an hour or two ago. Look out for that, especially those of you in social media world. Again, hello to those of you joining us live on the CNS Channel 6 Facebook page. We're glad that you could join us. So again, that was last week's press conference. This week, as you heard it from Ryan Belgrave earlier, he's the person who chairs those press conferences, chairs and coordinates those press conferences, and he is also the chairman of the Guyana Youth and Student Movement, as you heard it from him earlier, because I basically plucked him from, for want of a better term, from Congress Place and got him here to just sit with me for a few minutes or so to let you know that the information really and truly is current. The press conference today on that panel would have been the minister within the Ministry of Communities responsible for housing, the Honorable Annette Ferguson, and also the Minister of Communities himself, the Honorable Ronald Bulkin. So again, for those of you in social media world and not in our jurisdiction at this point, and you use the social media, the online, the World Wide Web to keep up to date with what's happening, look out for that press conference. Also, I want you to look out for it's probably online by now, but of course, because I'm here, I can't tell you that. But maybe an hour or two ago, also, the president himself had a sit-down, a 15-minute sit-down, whereby he basically reiterated his position, and by extension that of the government, to ensure credible elections are held at the earliest possible time. And I know he keeps stressing earliest possible time. The president has also maintained that the government continues to act in good faith, as is a testament with the meeting of the working groups. And remind you, that working groups still exist. The working groups chaired by PNCR Chair and Minister of Public Health, the Honorable Val Lawrence, in compliance with the ruling of the CCJ to hammer out the names to be submitted by the leader of the opposition. It is important to note that the CCJ, in giving its ruling, identified the need for a consensus approach to the formal submission of the names. Of course, more of that will come to you. More of that sit down is maybe I think it's about 15 minutes. My sources tell me that the sit down with the president had earlier would have been for about 15 minutes. So a statement is expected to release shortly if it has not yet been released, because I would have received this information maybe about an hour ago or so. So look out for that statement. Both in written form and of course the video format. Again, this is just to keep you updated with what's happening. I know it's a very sensitive and for some people a very tense period, and you know you want information to come to you as quickly as possible so that you will understand. And we owe it to you, the both government and opposition, they owe it to you at this point to get their positions out there and get the information out there so that you can understand what is happening in our country. I always like to remind people from the time all of this began. Actually, I'd like to go as far back, I think it's 2014, when we had when the other side didn't want to face a no confidence motion. So the former president, that honorable man, he prorogued the parliament. Well, I like to go as far back as 2014 to remind people to use all of these opportunities as a learning period for our country. It's giving you an opportunity to understand. You're not getting up every day and just going about your, it's good to do that, yes, and sometimes mind your own business and leave the politicking to the politicians and all of that and leave the rhetoric to them. But at the same time, it's giving you an opportunity to learn what is happening, to learn about your country. Sometimes you will even become more knowledgeable and more learned than the public officials and the government officials and the political officials, because you have a different view. You have viewership from both sides. You can sit on the sidelines and watch and see what's happens. And once you apply yourself and in turn apply the knowledge that you're getting and you use it, in a correct manner and you share it with others, it really and truly at the same time, it's a good thing for our country because we are learning. We're understanding our constitution a little better. Because just imagine if everything was business as usual from 2014 to now. Yes, you have a government, you elect the government, they go for 5 years, that's that, elections change, and it's the same thing over and over again. There would have been no opportunity for you to learn and understand what is happening. And if there are, again, like Ryan said, I am no attorney, I am no expert on this, but if there are things in our constitution that needs to be adjusted or needs to be changed, you are also in the know to understand what will happen if this doesn't happen, or what will happen if this in the constitution changes. Is it a case that we need to have a constitution? Is it in the 80s? Is it a case where we need to have the constitution adjusted in some sections of it to bring it up to what is happening modern? There's so many things that so many questions that you can ask, so many questions that you can get answers for. So I continue to urge you to please use this period also as one in which you are learning. And I'm specifically talking to people out here who think that it's okay to go on social media and just spout things out. It is okay to not know. If you don't know, you're in a better position, because that means you're going to apply yourself to learn. For people who think that they know everything, they're in a worse off position than you are, because if you think that you know everything, then there's nothing else for you to learn, and you're walking around thinking, oh hey, I've arrived, I know everything, and then there is not that opportunity for you to learn. So again, please use this period to stay calm and to stay peaceful, and use this as an opportunity to learn and to understand, and that also helps to form you, and it helps to change, it helps to evolve the way you think. We're going to leave it there for now. We're a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so earlier than we usually are. Because of the situation that we're in, the political climate that we're in, I'm going to try to refrain from telling you what's coming up next week, because that's exactly what happened this week. I planned for this week, and because of everything that is happening in terms of the information out there that I know I need to give you, we had to push forward that. So I'm not going to tell you whether we're going to be having a guest next week or another feature program again, because it's not just a black and white environment at this point. There are lots of gray areas, so we're just going to watch that and see how it unfolds. But as always, I'd like to thank you very much for tuning in and very much for continuing to support Facing the Nation. Again, to those of you who are watching live in the World Wide Web, thank you very much for always tuning in. Those of you who are out of the jurisdiction also, and you may be now tuning in to our program and you missed it, of course, the program will be uploaded in its entirety to my YouTube page and also to my Facebook page, maybe in another hour or two. But again, as always, thanks for tuning in. I remind you, do we have a holiday coming up? That's a little way off from now. It's going to be on the 1st of August. So those of you who are preparing and dealing with various activities, as always, I'd like to take the opportunity to give you best wishes on that. Anything that you're preparing to do. I know we're still in graduation mode. Some of the young ones, those of you who are at home, how can I forget that school is closed and some of the young ones are at home watching? Ensure that you find something constructive to do with your time. It's all good watching television, being on the internet, listening to music. Those things, everything helps you to be rounded. So I want to encourage your parents to ensure that you find that balance. Do everything. I mean, before you know it, September is here. So have fun, relax also. Those of you who choose to do, again, I don't like to use the word summer in our context, but I'm going to use it anyway so that you can understand what I'm talking about. So for those of you who are going to use the summer period to probably catch up on some of the subjects or the courses that you did not do so well in the previous semester or in the previous terms, I wish you all the best, but also ensure that you set aside some of that time for recreation. You cannot work, study 12 months a year without stopping. That is not healthy for you either. So find the time to whichever way that you